What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the one and only Form Check Friday. We're going to put your lifts up on this screen behind me and project them through my shirt today because for some reason that's been keyed out. And we're going to give you our best advice on how to improve your lifting, whether that's through programming, whether that's through technical adjustments. We're going to answer whatever questions you have in your emails. And if you're interested in submitting your video for consideration for Form Check Friday, go ahead and go over to calgarybarbell.com. Click FCF at the top and use the form there to get your video into us. Now, every week we leave off with a lifter for the comments section to give their constructive criticism to, and this time it was Bowman. What we do with that lifter is we start the next episode with them, so let's go. All right, now Bowman here is doing 275 for a set of 4. He's been lifting for 2 years, powerlifting for about 6 of those months. He's 16 years old, 172 pounds body weight, and has a 405 pound max deadlift. Now, he figures he might be too bent over at the start, but he says he feels mostly fine when he's going through the lift. And he also wonders if he has tight hip flexors or slight anterior pelvic tilt, which makes his stance narrower. So he's wondering if there's any tips on how to improve his start position. The first thing I'm seeing here, and a number of people pointed this out in the comments section, is that we're trying to sit the hips too low. We're actually sat too low there. So let me get my pen tool open here, and I'm going to show you what happens as soon as you are initiating the lift. You can see, whoop, hips need to come up a fair bit before that bar is breaking itself off the floor. So here, we're actually too upright. You mentioned that you might be too bent over. I don't think so. That would not be my assessment. My assessment would be that we're trying to be way too upright, causing the knees to be way out in front of the bar. Now, the bar is going to need to go up through there. If we just push straight up, not only are we basically squatting the bar up, but again, like, it's just not going to go until we get the hips back behind us a little bit more. So this is a much better starting position. Now, you'll notice the shift in knee position and hip position, like so. Now the camera moves slightly too, so that kind of throws off the direct the drawing there. But you'll notice that every time you pull down super hips low like this, your hips will come up before the bar starts off the floor. I'm also not sure. We're pausing these. Okay, yeah, there's a little pause on the first one. I would work to make the pauses a little bit more distinct. Now, the other thing I'm seeing once the camera comes around to the back, and this is kind of a cool idea actually for people submitting, if you have somebody kind of move around during the lift, like we saw there, it makes it harder to draw lines of reference and that kind of thing, but it does give us a couple different views of your lift. Now, one of the reasons we might be feeling limited in the hips is because we're trying to set the hips super, super low, and we're also trying to push the knees out really far, and we have the toes pointed out very, very far. I think you could probably get your heels out here, have a little bit more of a straightforward angle in your feet, and stop pushing your hips quite so low. And we might find a way more comfortable start position. We'll certainly find a more consistent start position, right? You can also see this little like lockout. It just looks like we're having a hard time getting the hips extended. A lot of the times that's because we're too externally rotated, right? We're pushing the knees out too hard. So if you're way too rotated out in the knees or in the hips, causing the knees to point outwards too far, and you're trying to bring your hips through, we're not going to get full hip extension. So a lot of the times, in order to get a good solid lockout, we're going to have to be a little more straightforward with the knees, a little less turned out. So those are my main pieces of advice. I think if you follow those, honestly, the mechanics of your deadlift look quite good, so I don't think you'll have much issue implementing those. And I think once you do, it's going to take your deadlift to the next level. Now, our next lifter here is Hayden. And Hayden says they've been having bench issues lately. They hit 310 in comp this past April and then competed again in November and only hit 270. So body weight, they said, had been stable and steady throughout the time. So they're wondering, why the heck are we plateauing? Now, let's take a look at this bench. Now, this looks like something that I commonly see. It's like an artifact of the era of multiply bench pressing that I think is still really pervasive in a lot of the untested federations. And it is that head lift. Now, I don't know that this accounts for your bench plateau. In terms of actually dealing with the plateau, Hayden, I think one of the things you probably want to look at is the programming. A lot of the times when we see plateaus, it's way more based on programming than it is on technique. Not to say technique doesn't play a part, but take a look at the programming that you were doing, the frequency, the intensity, the kind of movements, how specific they were to your competition lift, and look at those as a reference point from when you hit 310 to this most recent competition. And if those things haven't changed, maybe they should. If they have changed, maybe you need to go back to something closer to what you had before. Also, if anybody's looking for good programming, check out the Calgary Barbell app. It has a whole bunch of training programs in the training library, or in the program library rather. And you get access to our private Discord where myself and Danny are doing form checks every week, just like this one. Now, back to the head lift. The reason I take issue with the head lift on the bench press is because we essentially want the opposite to be happening, right? If we're bringing the head up this way, that means we're lengthening up this way, right? Which means we're curling. The upper back is going to be going into a little bit of flexion, at least potentially. The shoulders are going to be elevating a little bit more, right? When you move your head forward, all those things follow, and all those things are the exact opposite of what we're trying to do in the bench press. We're trying to keep the chest up. We're trying to keep the shoulders in a very, very stable position. Now, again, there are degrees of retraction, of pulling the shoulder blades together towards the spine, and depression, which is pushing the shoulder blades away from the ears, that are going to create your position. It's not necessarily a more is better, but the stability of those forces, both retraction and depression, the stability of those forces when it comes to the shoulder blades is what's going to create the tension, what's going to create the stability for your bench press. And if we're losing those things by lifting the head, that means likely the chest is collapsing. We're lengthening our range of motion, and we don't really get any benefit out of that. Equipped lifters used to do that because what would happen is yes, we'd pick the head up, we would loosen the chest plate of the shirt a little bit to get that last little bit of range of motion, to get the touch, so that we could get the press. I guess not I haven't multiply lifted, but anyways. I know the feeling, right? Even with single ply shirts, very much the same thing. So this head lift and this sink here, I think is probably the first thing I would identify in ways to potentially improve your bench, right? It looks like you're trying really hard to keep your chest up, and then right before the bar touches the chest, we're dipping. We're losing that chest. We're losing that upper back tension. We're undoing a lot of that. And from there, we're pressing from a slight disadvantage. So honestly, Hayden, that would be one of the first things I would tackle, as well as taking a really deep look at the programming. Now, you'll notice you have a heavier touch here as well. Not inherently a bad thing. I think for a long time I was on the side of more control is better, a lighter touch is better. I've changed my position on that. I think you can absolutely have a heavier touch, but I do think that control and consistency are still very important, and maintaining the back contraction, the back tightness when we have the heavier touch, also very, very important. So you can investigate and try and see what it would be like to have a lighter touch. Maybe look at your old videos from when you were pressing better and see if you had a lighter touch, and use those to help your decision making. So a whole bunch of stuff in there. Hopefully that helps. Now our next lifter here is Donovan. Donovan is 23, been powerlifting for about 10 months, and he says his squat and bench have been progressing really nicely. However, he said his deadlift has been mostly plateaued, and he's having some issues with lockout and shaky knees, he said. Okay, so I can see that there. This is a top single 435 at 8.5. And he's wondering what he can do to fix this up. So let's take another quick look at what happens here. So off the floor, we're looking pretty good to about just past the knees, right? And here's where we start to run into issues. Now, if we look at how you are oriented, I think what I would probably identify as the main culprit here is the fact that we're a little on the toes, and it looks like we're really trying to bring the hips forward to the bar while remaining on the toes. I would recommend that after the bar come across the knees, for you, not for everybody, But for you in this instance, we try to get back on the heels and we try to pull the bar back to our position without coming forward to the bar. Now, I've had some reps like this in competition, and it's caused me to bobble the bar. If you go and look at my equipped deadlifts from Open Worlds in 2019 in Dubai, you'll see, I think it was my first and second attempt had a small bobble where I did this exact same thing. I'm out on the toes, I'm too far forward, and I go to the bar instead of pulling the bar to me. And that causes me some balance issues and causes the lockout to be a little janky. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. So let's see. If we look at the foot position, do we actually see a change coming from where we are forward? Okay, so we can't see it necessarily in the footprint, but you can see that bar position definitely comes back more this way, right? When we're out here shaking, the bar doesn't actually change much in terms of vertical position, but you can see the horizontal position of the bar is further out forward, right? So I think what we're seeing happen is that bar is getting out away from your center of gravity, and you're having to work really, really hard to not get pulled forward with it, which is causing you to shake around a little bit. So I would try that and work a little bit on your sort of stability at lockout, perhaps slow it down a little bit, try to be really intentional with how you're extending your hips, and hopefully that cleans it up for you. And now we have Andre. Andre is doing some squats. Andre's 21 years old, training for about a year, powerlifting for 4 months of those. Plans to compete, but he says he's working on 1,000-pound total. I would say just do it in a meet. Why not? Now there's a squat single at 145, which he said was a PR. Now, he said he definitely had more in the tank, but had some, his lower back started to tense up towards the end of this session, but he didn't have any pain or discomfort the next morning, so he's not too worried about it. Now, he says he's worried about depth and might just be overthinking it, but wondering if we can pick out anything, specifically that he can work on with his squat, anything that he can, pick apart and try to clean up. So I'm going to leave this one for all of you beautiful people out there in YouTube land to go ahead and give your 2 cents in the comments below. Let's try to be encouraging for our friend Andre here, and let's offer our best advice. I'm going to come back next week as usual and start off with Andre, so tune in for that every Friday, Form Check Friday. Bye-bye day.